Where did all that go? It's like the gold. Where did it go? Like, where did all the grains go? I have an opinion and idea that they kept drip feeding the carryover stocks in to keep markets stabilized, because these food shortages are going to come out of the blue for almost everybody. And it'll be a sudden from 0 to 100 where, the logical person might ask a question and say, wait, how did we have abundant food supplies last year and this year we're into a famine? Like, how do you swing that much on a pivot in a single year? The new normal? Uncertainty is the new normal. War, pandemics, partisan politics, and Jerome Powell. There's a consistent sense of tension, fear, and anxiety since this pandemic. The stock market's gotten crushed, our national debt soared, and inflation pummeling most Americans. Since March 2020, gold's up 30% and silver doubling. Now we have Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo all forecasting gold well above $2,000 an ounce in 2022, and even potential price targets of $3,000. Call the Patriot Gold Group today before it's too late. Patriot Gold Group has the No Fee for Life IRA, where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold and silver, and you may be eligible for the No Fee for Life IRA on qualifying rollovers. Call 1-800-356-4470 for a free investor guide today. And with the knowledge that Patriot Gold Group is Consumer Affairs' top-rated gold IRA dealer from 2016 to present, click on the link in the description box below for more information. And now on with the video. Well, just what it proves to me is Eurasia is being set up as the new center of the planet, if you will. And, I didn't realize the abundant food production coming out of India. I knew they produced a lot of rice. I knew they produced a lot of millet, that sort of thing. But I did not realize that they produce 110 million tons of wheat every year. I didn't know that until just recently. That is a huge, that puts them in the number 5 position of the world's production of wheat. That is insane, because Canada write them off. They're really going into a tailspin of production. They're at 40-year lows on the canola right now. So, yeah, America back into 7-year lows on the wheat, but I think it's far greater than that. Because, see, what I don't like is when they do these crop forecasts and they're showing you all this. It's called, what was that? Wheat Armageddon, I think was the name of the article. Talked about that in a couple videos ago. They were spinning out that the entire wheat production was down 7-year lows, and they were focusing a little bit on the spring wheat. But what nobody focuses on are the specific breakdowns of the different types of wheat and the percentage declines in those. Because if you look at durum wheat, stuff to make pasta, that was at a 100-year low in production last year. They didn't have enough to even fill a percentage of the world demand for durum wheat. Now, that's hugely different than throwing it all together and say wheat's down at a 7-year low compared to like splicing it out in individual. Okay, let's look at what the spring and what the hard red. What about? They don't do that. They lump it all together and then give you a figure. Well, then it's up to people like me to come in and just sort that all out and break it apart so you can see individually where it sits. Drought's ripping through the spring wheat right now, so that that's going to be terribly down in the production. And then we got the cutoffs again from now. So to put it in perspective, Russia and Ukraine supply 30% of all the exported grains across the planet. 30%. So they're going offline. So so you just subtracted 30% off the global export market immediately. There's no way to make that up. It's physically impossible to make it up unless you dip into the carryover stocks. And what that means is what's left over in the silos and in the grain storage facilities and the warehouses that was not used in production from last year, that's really carried over into this harvest season or these months now. Well, that is down to an incredible low as well. I think they have 57 million tons globally available. And that turns into about 3 weeks of global supply for food if it was pulled at 100%. So where did it go? And another thing, where's the incredible disappearing carryover stocks? Because Rex, you know me for how many years? We started this channel started way back, 2014. And back then there were 700 million tons of carryover stock. We sit at 57 million tons today, depending if you believe the USDA numbers or not. Where did all that go? It's like the gold. Where did it go? Like, where did all the grains go? You know, I have an opinion and idea that they kept drip feeding the carryover stocks in to keep markets stabilized, because these food shortages are going to come out of the blue for almost everybody. And it'll be a sudden from 0 to 100 where, you know, the logical person might ask a question and say, wait, how did we have abundant food supplies last year and this year we're into a famine? Like, how do you swing that much on a pivot in a single year? Unless the food wasn't there to begin with and it had been, you know, drip fed out to stabilize markets. It was almost like they moved it from one warehouse to another warehouse to try to, you know, keep the same numbers. That was my opinion. It was like 3 years ago. I tried to dissect that and do a very in-depth article on it. Like, it seems like the food just, or the granary, the grain storage just kept getting passed around, but it was the same sets of grains that were moving around that finally came to the total. And, you know, now I'm getting some more verification on this, where it seems like the numbers are not what you can believe they are, just like what you're seeing with the visual imagery happening right now.
Is there a possibility that this food and this gold could be used for projects off Earth?
Perhaps it was stored underground for continuity of governments and whatnot. Because, I mean, you got to think about, most governments are very aware of this grand solar minimum, crop losses, and these big cycles coming in. There's going to be huge loss of global population. I mean, massive. The vid didn't do it to the point maybe that you thought it might, but this one is going to this is it. This is the real deal here. So how much would you put underground for continuity of government for, say, 200 of the nations on the planet for multiple years? We're not talking about just next year or next year. We're talking about taking them all the way to 2033 or 2032, somewhere around there. So how much would you need to stockpile globally for 200 nations to keep a continuity of government? Again, enough people fed to run the government, provide security, have maintenance, repair operations, and everything going. Like, how much food would all these nations need for about a 9-year period underground? Maybe that's where all this is gone. Just saying. I'm throwing a second possibility. Instead of being off Earth, how about under?
Yeah, that makes more sense. A lot more sense. Huh.
It's gone somewhere. And, you know, the containers too, where did they all go? Because remember, this has been through, you know, the time of the vid. They went from so many empty containers just stacked up to the moon almost, of disused containers blocking ports. You know how many articles they came, like, there's so many containers, we can't even barely move cargo because there's so many of them just stacked to the rafters that are not going back to their place of origin. And now last year they're having a massive container shortage where they needed to manufacture about 1.5 million new containers across the planet. And we're talking about 20-foot or 40-foot, 53-foot shipping containers. Now, where did those go? Unless they were packed and went somewhere underground, continuity of government, but it's used, but it's completely taken off the market because it's being stored elsewhere. And that would really explain it as to why they needed to manufacture so many new shipping containers. And then you start to get, oh, wait a minute, a lot of this is starting to make sense now here.
So it's really like just the fact that the weather is changing so much that unless there's huge changes, and it sounds like it's too late. Like, if they would have worked on this, let's say if we were to go back 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 50 years, and they built these infrastructures that were heavily fortified, food production inside of buildings, stuff under the crust of the earth, maybe a few miles down, maybe just a few thousand feet down. But they've probably done a lot of that maybe we don't even know about. They just haven't made it public, whereas other nations have actually made it public that they're building bunker systems for their people.
Russia would be one of those. Gee, check the box. It's all about who knew this cycle was inbound. when the onset was, when the tumultuous period would hit due to the upset in the fabric of society and civilization tearing due to lack of food, and who's riding on top of the cycle, knowing the same exact timelines to maintain control as we go through this phase here. That's kind of where we're sitting in. And I'm saying almost all major governments that we know as superpowers, banking powers, export powers, all knew this. And they have been preparing for such a long time for this event here. Now, how many C-level and C-class executives have retired over the last 2 years? Yeah, you could say, you know, because of the downturn in the economy and the contraction, et cetera, from the vid, that, yeah, a lot of people retired. But there's an extraordinarily large amount of C-level executives heading Fortune 5s, Fortune 1000s that just en masse, 20, 30,000 of them just all retiring in the same year. And then prior to that, it was like 5,000 or 6,000 prior to that. I mean, really, and all in this 2 years, and then we get into food. And, you know, this was the whole thing about the grand solar minimum forecast was now. This year was the year it would onset to the point of kicking in and knocking off global food production where it could no longer be masked. And the global awareness would be risen and everybody would understand what a grand solar minimum was and what cycles of solar activity are and why great civilizations through history have come and gone. From Mesopotamia, Central Africa, China, Middle East. I love Harappa, the Indus Valley, Indus civilization, cradle of civilization. Why did they disappear? And they're always on such a precise timeline of disappearance and emergence. Somebody knew this. Somebody knew this cycle was here again. And you know, that's the whole thing is, when you know this cycle's back, the realization is you can't salvage the world that exists at the time that this cycle moves through. Never has, not even once, never will at the current way, unless there was some other way to produce food and electricity that we're not taught or we don't know about. But up to this point, the track record is 100% collapse of all civilizations that have gone through this cycle. Up to now, there has been not one that has survived this. They shatter, they break, they reform, they start again. There's a new monetary system, a new way to trade, a new political system, a new way of ruling the classes, the people, the masses. New trade, new routes, new exports. Things start again. And I think that's where we sit today. Because look at all the things that are coming in, central bank digital currency, or even crypto. That's all set for a new world that makes no sense to us at the moment in the way we would buy, sell, and trade. New monetary system, new energy production systems, new fuel production systems. And with the electric gravitics, if you take it a little step further and you ramp up the RPMs, you can make that same device weightless. And then you're talking about weightless travel. And then that opens up a whole different realm of what has been and could have been if we didn't have to pay for transportation fuels. You know, so this new world we're stepping into, going to be far less people, but it might be that utopian world on, at least on the outside that you think, but the control mechanism on top to be able to exist within that quote unquote utopia of free energy, free food, instant communication, instant transfer of payments, I don't know. Maybe I'm rambling.
No, I was going to say you just hit on something that I feel was it's like a synchronicity. We'll call it synchrotron. I'm almost finished with the second. It's a graphic novel that I'm putting together. And today, one of the scenes, we were describing how, well, let's just say we've got gods and goddesses and deities a part of this this second graphic novel, and one of them realizes that he can rule over everything, and there's going to be this utopia, and the utopia, there's going to be peace, and it'll look great on the surface, but when you start to actually realize the underpinnings of the system, it's a very draconian, non-abstract, very binary, like it's going to be a 0 or a 1. You're not going to have an opportunity. It's going to be a stick figure. It's not going to be a Picasso kind of thing. But it's all going to be refined, and you're all going to, but then you just said it right there, dude. You just said what we put in there. That was one of the scenarios. There's actually 3 scenarios presented in the graphic novel, but there's more than that. This deity chooses not to take either 3 of those. One of them is a solar flare that wipes out the earth. Another one's this peace and harmony through artificial means. And and that's all I'm going to share because it's not out yet. But dude, you just totally linked it. That's really cool, man. That was really cool. I agree.
Can I tell you another little purchase I've gotten into here?
Yeah.
Oh, Lost Book of Enki.
I have been told I should read it. Have you finished it?
No, I'm just starting it. I just received it a few days back, but looking at blueprints on rulers of planets, how long has this, the traditional timeline that we're fed, it started here and then we're here now. It started 7,000 years ago and then we're here now. Yeah, during this interglacial. But, you're looking further past, there's been many control systems. There are many thousands and tens of thousands of years, if not multiple ice ages and interglacials from then to now. So, looking at how something might be coordinated and ruled in the future, after a reset, after a collapse, it's very well possible that it might follow a blueprint that has been quantified, written about, and recorded from the past. So do we need to look to the past to find the future? I really believe that the past holds all the clues to what we're about to experience. I mean, I can pretty well peg this year of what's going to happen. May, they understand the fertilizer and the herbicide shortages are going to knock down global production, in addition to what's being offline from the war. June and July, when they get to they're going to put a bunch of rosy forecasts out in May, but really when it gets to June and July and these farmers and the news or anybody can see in the fields with their bare eyes, like, there's nothing there, man. There's really nothing there. At that point, the scales are totally tipped. And when it comes into harvest season and they don't have anything, I mean, when I say not anything, way lower than 50% of the average yields coming across the planet, at that point, the world as we know it will have dissolved, and we're going to enter a new phase of, up to this point, it's been sort of a slow unraveling. Well, this is the supercharged unraveling that's happening this year with the food at the harvest season. So then what happens from there? Well, you're going to get rationing. You're going to get a lot of troops stationed in stores. There's going to be a lot of things not available. There are going to be food riots. There are going to be people in the streets demanding change that are of, countries that can't afford the food, or even in our own nation, those who can't afford the food. And it's just going to upset the entire balance. And it would not be past me of people leaving the cities to come out to countryside to start looking for food or raiding houses at that point. Like, that's the general direction it's going. Now in 2023, that was the year 2023 and 24 when we were supposed to get into significant gargantuan crop losses from this grand solar minimum. Jet streams going out of phase, magnetic field wandering. 2023, that magnetic field north is going to hit around the 40-degree north latitude, and when it does, that sort of heavier, denser, and the way it was explained is 40 degrees north up to the North Pole, it's a denser type of magnetic medium that holds that magnetic north in place, so it can't jostle around as much. But once it hits 40 degrees north, once it goes below that into, say, 39 degrees north, then there's nothing as much to hold it in place, and the magnetic field, North Pole, can wander where it wants much faster, like a really exponential clip up. Instead of being 40 miles a year that we've been experiencing for the last 30 years, the way they're measuring it, it could go to 500 miles a year at that point. So this is all planned anyway. What was expected for 2023 and 24? I was saying clearly that by the year 2024, the magnetic fields will be so upset on the planet, you will see plasma petroglyphs in the sky in front of you due to the fallout, jet streams, cloud cells, electromagnetic penetration of what would generally be stopped is going to hit near Earth, literally just if not thousands of feet above us, where airplanes fly in below, you would see plasma petroglyphs out, and the magnetics and the electrical activity on electrical storms, they're going to be arcing above the storm out to the ionosphere, as well as discharging on the planet. Like you're going to see electrical discharge that'll hang in the sky for 8 seconds, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, doing its petroglyph thing up there. And some of the larger events are going to hang in the sky. And when you see all this, I mean, society would rift anyway, because people just would not believe their eyes, and that it would be the end of the world for most people in their minds. But, put it into perspective where we sit today and what's happening so quickly. And we're only 2 years away from you manifesting and seeing physical things in the skies in front of you because of these same energies and lack thereof, affecting the entire system of our planet. So once that magnetosphere weakens considerably, and any type of solar storm can send, Aurora down to Tennessee or Aurora down to Texas on like an M1 or something like this. Debris, space debris, we're going to get a lot more of that because it won't get burned up. It'll actually make it to the ground in just greater and greater amounts. But that plasma display in the sky, 2024 was my call, because those gas giants lining up there, October of 2024, all this magnetism and electromagnetism are going to behave very, very strangely. And that was the culmination, because it matches with 79 AD with the way the planets are lined up. So if we're this close in and they're doing this drastic of action, that what I am talking about further out that would freak people out enough to collapse society is here already, and it is inbound and intensifying, or else there wouldn't be this much push so far to control humanity and cause a purposeful collapse at this speed, unless what I was saying in 2024 is truly inbound and maybe even a little faster. So these plans need to be sped up, if you will, for collapse and control. The food was going to be knocked off the table anyway. See, that's the root cause, is the food was going to decline year upon year. This was the year that it would be understood. So 2023, governments would have less control, because you would starve or might not have food. Nobody's paying taxes. Nobody's going back to work. Nobody's investing. They've pulled all their money out of the markets by then to try to buy food or get seeds or get tools to plant. And then 2024 would have been even worse, because after the atrocious yields of 2023, what you consider the world today would not function in any way, shape, or form. That was at the linear progression of where it was going, just on the sun, the losses from the sun creating on our jet streams and cloud cells out of sync. So they had to throw this war thing in to explain away. One last rant here, Rex. I'm going to ramble for a second. The grand solar minimum crop losses, the fertilizer shortages, I understood was a mask for that. But, we as a planet could have got together and made a Manhattan Project to get fertilizer production first, second, and third, foremost of everything across every country, across the entire planet, and made sure all the farm inputs went to the farmers next year if there was a shortage or a famine this year. But then how would you explain even further losses, even though you had the fertilizers and the herbicides? Because the sun's driving the climate. The sun is knocking the crop yields off, the decline in solar activity. So now you have to have a second excuse on top of that. Well, now there's a fertilizer embargo from Russia. So, how many layers deep we are on the cake here of excuses? I mean, these things were going to happen anyway. See, that's the whole thing to understand. It's not happening organically. It's to cover what was going to happen organically, literally organically, from the solar decline in activity, the waning magnetosphere, and the electrical disturbance and changes on the planet that are going to really start to have a few things on the crust here right about now. May, June, crust is going to start behaving strangely. Now cover that up, Rex. Be the government and cover all that up. Have an excuse so the populace doesn't panic, and then panic them when you want to. And then panic here, push them here. You know how they're going to react. Put more control over there. You need to control the collapse. People are starving there. We need more police there. Now control that. All the way down through the next couple of years, because each successive year is going to be less and less and less productive. So it's got to be covered up, hidden, and excused away. So you're seeing the result of it. That's what this war is all about. This war is not about anything except covering up the crop losses, and then just throwing all the export embargoes and fertilizer shortages that cover up then the fertilizer shortages, which only go one layer deep.
So, it sounds like that's probably the biggest portion. Sure, there's other parts that are interconnected there. But when you look at, like you said, the reality of the big picture, and you put all the pieces together, it appears that they are covering up a major food shortage. And when people need to take care of their families and they don't have the means to do so, they may be less likely to go to work and follow orders if they're looking, if that's not going to work for them to provide for their family, or if they don't have that chance to go to work. So now they're going to freak out. And then as a government body, there's going to be the continuation of government, and people are going to know about how society is going to collapse and fall apart, and people are going to go crazy because they're going to have the psychological profiles. They're going to have the history. They're going to have the data. They're going to have the forecast. They're going to have the technology that predicts the forecast. Quantum computers. I mean, I don't even know how advanced quantum computers are, but imagine an algorithm that uses quantum computers as a way to see into the future, like a looking glass type technology. It would be incredible and remarkable, especially with all the data that it could use to crunch the numbers to come up with the scenarios that would take place. And this fits in perfectly with the transhuman movement, with the digital everything. I love technology. I love the digital world. However, if you're going to try and plug me into the digital world continuously, then that's where I draw the line. You're not going to implant me. If you want to give me a wearable, cool, put me on, man. I'll get a wearable and I'll plug into the machine that way, but I'm not going to implant something into my brain to have these opportunities. So it would be even easier to hack. Now, I think that they have technologies to hack people's brain wirelessly without any type of implants, but it could be even more effective and more controlling and more linking to a system of imagine my vision, dude, is that at the top levels, it's not even people anymore. We're talking like synthetic intelligence that's feeding people what to do. It's like, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the most fair of them all? You are, master. Oh, this is what you need to do. Let me put in this new calculation of the people. What do I have? What do I do today, computer? No, man, there's something else that's running this show and putting us all in this scenario. And maybe it's going to use this as a way to usurp up all of, as much as it can, of civilization into a digitized world. So it digitizes everything, and then it lives in technology in perpetuity while there's these resets and resets and resets. Then it comes back a few thousand years later and starts, or maybe a few years later when people start to rebuild and kind of puts these little bits and pieces in front of them about, oh, look at this little invention. Look at this idea. And it's just this cycle. This synthetic intelligence, I don't think it's fake. It's real. It's very real. It's just using a different body. And let me ask you, man, if you were so intelligent that you figured out how to live forever, would you not be almost like a synthetic intelligence? Would you not figure out how to travel through the digital world and then recreate in the physical? Almost like, oh, well, I'm going to print up another body of myself and fly around in a spaceship for thousands of years, and then people won't know what I am. They're going to think I'm a gray. They're going to think I'm a Nordic. They're going to think I'm a reptilian shapeshifter. When in reality, it's something that's making all of them. Whoa, pass the bong, bro.
Maybe it's been around for millions of years, and we're just in the hologram after the 3,000th rodeo of the same reset. So you got to think about, the age of our planet. What's it, 4.5 billion years? I mean, around that. But then, if you go with traditional science, quote unquote, they said that the universe itself is 12.5 billion years old. So where we've come in the last 200 years, or even the last 7,000, something else has a 8 billion year head start on us. So when you're talking about synthetic intelligence, there's really nothing that's outside the scope of any possibility of being as intelligent or as ethereal or different kind of energetic body signature. It's all possible. And the technologies which you consider that we can't even fathom, that there's so many millions or tens of millions or hundreds of millions of years advanced from us. Perhaps that's where we're in right now. Because they mapped everybody out. Like, they already know through your social media profiles, you hit that on the head. Like, they pretty much know how everybody's going to react to the crisis. How everybody's going to, are you going to throw lead down range? They probably know you will or won't based on your profiles and maybe your apathy or sympathy toward humanity posts or whatnot. So, they probably already mapped everybody's actions out on how extreme they could take it or how extreme you might get. I mean, how 20 years on a supercomputer that, what do they give us in the public domain here of computers, supercomputers? Yeah, okay, you got D-Wave. Okay, wow. Well, it's hard to even kind of understand that for most people. So they just brush it off like, oh, it's a super fast thing. It can do like trillions of calculations per second. Okay, well, what about trillions of posts per second based against a person's profile run out in real time of all possible trillion combinations of that coming out and another 2 seconds after that? And really mapping that out. And okay, then they get splits and thrown into the different profiles as an informational basis on what it might be. And what if that's happening every single second of every day in real time of every possible computation that's possible coming out of a human brain onto the electronic sphere, as we know, the internet or phone recorded conversations off your smart devices and whatnot, in real time updated by the trillions or tens of trillions of possible outcomes per second in real time. And then that's the file. And because you can't tell me that there hasn't been really incredible, intelligent, far advanced species that are blasting around these galaxies here. I mean, how many ancient tales of wormholes, portals, devices, stargates, human visitation from the heavens itself on a physical craft, underworld, external world. I mean, ancient history is littered with nothing but that. So, I mean, if you were going to live in ancient history, all you would be is living in a sci-fi movie, basically. It seems that this current iteration is the only time that we are not in that same visitation period of constant contact with whatever beings of intelligence or origin. We're the only time it's not been. So that's also like an outlier if you look through history, at least these last 7,000 years.